Welcome to the third installation of Jumpstarting Business Operations webinar series. Today, we're going to be talking about how to handle intense demand when customers make up for lost time. I'm Zane Clark, Senior Director of Education. As we always like to do to kick off webinars is go through a few housekeeping items. First rule of house cleaning while listening to music is never use your toilet brush as a microphone. Very important. That can lead to an uncomfortable situation. I did hear a laugh there in the background from our presenter today, so I appreciate that. There's a control panel that you have on your screen, hopefully, if you're doing this thing right, and it's got a lot of cool functions on it. A couple things I want to point out for you. If you called in or logged in using your computer audio and like to switch over to your phone, you'll notice that there's an audio tab there, and it's got some numbers, a PIN code, and then an access code. If you can follow all three steps, you can call in with your phone. You'll also see that there is a questions tab there. Please, we encourage you to submit questions at any time throughout today's webinar, and we will get those addressed at the end. You'll also notice there is a handout button there. And what that does is there's a great resource that our speaker put together that will help for today, then also be a takeaway that you can use following today's webinar. At the end of today's webinar, we will call out a special recipient who will get the opportunity to participate in 11-part e-course by Brain Zooming and Mike Brown, Strategic Planning Made Simple. That will be awarded to one attendee at the end of today's call. So we encourage you to stick around to the very end because you may be eligible to receive that. All right, let's meet our tour guide for the next 30 minutes. I am proud to partner with Mike Brown, CEO and founder of the Brain Zooming Group. There he is. Mike, how's it going, brother?
Hey, Zane, going well. I think my wife is cleaning the restroom in the next room, so I'm going to let her know about the toilet brush thing. That's good info.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I was going to bring in a prop, but I was worried that I might actually use it.
Yeah,
so I decided to conservative with that approach. But hey, Mike, we've been this is our third webinar that we've been working on together. So it's old hat here to some folks, but it's been a really valuable series as people navigate coming out of the other side of this. And we see in the news that states are starting to open up at various levels.
Yeah.
So today's webinar really couldn't be more timely. Quick background on Mike, if you haven't been on the other two webinars, he is a frequent speaker at SEMA and PRI. We've known each other for 5 or 6 years now and just continually impressed with his ability to take complicated information, put it in a very practical way for the automotive aftermarket. He's also a prolific author, I like to say. His latest book, Idea Magnets, helps leaders cultivate extreme creativity and innovative success. He's even bringing props today, folks. We're getting good at this. All right, without further ado, one other housekeeping note, and this is a legitimate one, not about a toilet brush. We're going to put up here a poll in a moment on the current status of your business operations. And it's informal. We're not publicly sharing the information beyond today's webinar necessarily, but we're just trying to get a gauge of how businesses are doing out there, and to a certain extent, it'll help guide Mike's conversation. All right, there it is. There's the poll. All right, have a great webinar, and I'll come back at the end of the half hour here. Thanks, everybody.
Great, thanks, Zane. Yeah, as Zane said, this poll is really just to understand kind of where you're at in this whole topic that we're going to be talking about today. Let me see. There we go, advance it. It's about intense demand when your customers have been waiting. So if you fall into that category where you've been reduced capacity, you've had a limited availability to bring people in, or maybe been shut down completely, what's going to happen when all of a sudden things turn back on and everybody's heading your direction? So let me.
Yeah, I'm going to jump in here, Mike. It looks like your screen is paused, and it may be the poll function.
Yeah.
So we have some tech support on the back end there. Gary, if you want to drop down to that poll, we can get Mike back up. This is happening in real time, folks. This is live. This is exciting.
Because we'll edit this out later. You'll never hear any of this.
That's right. The magic of editing. All right. If we can get the poll taken down, and then Mike, I don't know if you want to hit. There you are, buddy. Good to see your face again.
There we go.
All right, here we go.
And you're seeing my screen?
Yeah, we're good to go, man.
Okay, cool. Excellent.
Right,
so, and I guess, Zane, maybe if you want to dive in, if you've got the poll results at some point, but basically, if you've been shut down or reduced capacity, this is going to be probably particularly appropriate to you. As Zane said, I've got a company called Brain Zooming. We've been around for about 10 years and help companies think about strategy, help them think about innovation. And this toolkit, this e-course, Strategy for Success, that somebody's going to get a prize today from, it's a way to help you with questions and tools to think about your strategy, whether you're basically sort of running a shop yourself or you've got a team. It's a way to bring them in and move through strategy in a really effective fashion. So maybe you've seen these kind of memes that are out there where they said, if you thought toilet paper is bad, just wait till 300 million people are trying to get their hair cut at the same time. So, barbershops, salons, those are great examples of things where people having pent up demand and really anxious about this. And I know the person who cuts my hair actually called me last week, and we had an appointment scheduled for this Thursday to finally get my hair cut. But all of a sudden, the state of Kansas changed the rules. They came out with new ones, and now it's 2 weeks away. So there's a lot going on in terms of customers who've got needs, state regulations, local regulations at play, and to think about what are you going to do and how are you going to handle it. If you're in this situation where people have been kept from coming to you, maybe they're not getting service right now, or there's parts that they need that they haven't been able to get, there's 3 things we're going to talk about today in how you can address that and sort of understand how do you best make sure you're going to provide great service when you're able to open back up, maybe still in a limited capacity. One is to understand the new important, and we'll talk about what that means. We discussed it in an earlier webinar too, but it's not so much about the new normal, we don't think. It's about what's important now and what do you bring forward, but what's going to be the wrinkles, the new approaches that you've got to take. The other 2 pieces that we'll hit too are how you manage that demand if you've got pent up demand, and are there ways to boost capacity in smart ways if you feel like there's going to be this influx of business, and how do you deal with it? So the first piece, what is the new important for you? Got some questions, some areas to think about, but you really have to understand as you look at your customers and you look at the competitive set, maybe you've had some competitors shut down or they're not going to come back as quickly. You need to think about what's important to you right now. And that may be winning back customers. You've got a loyal customer base, and everything you're going to do coming back out is really focused on how do we get them back? How do we reach out and make sure that we're taking care of the people who've been as loyal to us as possible? It may be developing new customers where, like I said, maybe a competitor shut down, or there's some things that you're able to do that maybe another competitor can't. So you're trying to attract some new customers. It may be just really making sure that you can have as much capacity and serve as broad an audience as possible, and how you maximize that. Maybe you place a real emphasis on services or a process that allows you to get as many people through your store, even if you've got some limitations. It may be that you're having to pivot your business, that you're doing dramatically new things. So that becomes more important. And it's not so much your previous customers, but looking at who are these new customers for new products, new services that you're planning to offer, and how do you take advantage of them. So a really important thing to understand as you think about managing demand and looking at capacity, what are you trying to accomplish? And you want to build everything else around that. And if you've been on the previous webinars, I'm not going to tell you, here's what to do, here's a case study, as much as give you multiple ways to look at your situation so you can generate a lot of ideas and a lot of possibilities. And just as a backdrop, and Zane and I were talking about this morning back and forth, think about, or I guess sort of my scenario is going to be a business that's maybe $1 million, $1.5 million a year, where there's an owner or a significant person who really is able to provide most of the service, but there's some other people who can provide parts of the service that they do. But as they look back in turning on the business again, maybe limited, like in the state of Kansas, first couple of weeks, it's going to be 10 people in a lot of places, or 30 people, maybe 90 people later in June. So that's not a lot of capacity necessarily. In thinking through, what do you do? Which customers do you reach out to? And I'll tell you, this is loosely based on a church situation that I've been involved with, and we're using these very tools to think about how do you open back up and make sure that you're serving everybody who wants to be served. So the first piece of this is managing demand. Your customers who've been sitting on the sidelines and are looking to you now for parts, for service, how are you going to accommodate that if you've got some limitations? This framework is something that I've put together over the last few weeks to really think through this. And I try and use these to help make sure I'm thinking about all the possibilities. And the good news for you is, since I've done the thinking through it, you don't have to. You'll just be able to sort of use them and see how they apply to your business. But the x-axis, the bottom axis, is really thinking about time frame. Are you going to look at your customers in light of previous times, what they've done with you, current times, what they're going to be doing, how you're going to be interacting with them as you come back online, or in the future? And then on the y-axis, the up and down, in terms of, well, where do customer behaviors fit into that? Is it really, you're looking at long-term relationships up on the top? Maybe it's more transactional, and it's about a current purchase and how they're thinking about you, how you're interacting. Or maybe you want to take that out of the mix as well. In doing that, identify basically 7 pockets of groupings of options that you've got. From the upper left, where a future long-term thing, maybe a promise, a contract, some kind of a business commitment. Coming down a little bit, maybe the cooperate thing is people who are going to be very efficient to serve. Up in the upper left, relationship. Maybe it's your best customers, and you're really going to focus there and look at those options. Down in the lower right, maybe there's some segments of your customer base you really want to try and focus on. Again, if you're pivoting, that may be particularly important. Maybe part of your customer base is going to be more important to you. In the middle is effort. That's basically the, somebody who first come, first serve, they're going to show up early. The welcome piece on the other side, on the lower right, maybe new customers, and are you doing things to attract those customers? So some ideas there. And then the luck piece is basically sort of luck of the draw, or randomizing, maybe where people get an opportunity to come in. And again, I've been thinking about a lot of businesses who are in this surge or pent-up demand kind of situation. So when I pull back those labels, here's a variety of options within each of those you can think about. And as I said, for this business we're thinking about, maybe the typical approach for them has been they have open hours and people show up and that's it. So that's sort of that first come, first serve during particular service hours in the middle. But suppose they're restricted now. They could serve 500 people a day, but now they can serve maybe 100 people a day because of limitations. What could they do? Well, they could look at loyal customers or people who are sort of insiders or friends up on top in the upper left, and think about, well, maybe we reach out to them a little bit early. Maybe it's we've got new processes, and if people are able to reserve a time, I ran into this with some curbside purchases during this period where you had a specific time and you had to show up. That's this sort of cooperation piece. Maybe it's a random drawing, and this is something you look at where you've got available number of slots, you've got people who maybe online have been reaching out or know that you're going to be opening back up, and it's just sort of luck of the draw who comes in. Maybe a segment, or maybe you put some of these together where that here's your best group of customers, you can only serve them maybe over a couple of week period. Maybe it's a random drawing within that. So these are some ways to think about how could you manage demand if you've got more people who want to do business with you, then maybe you can accommodate right away. So it doesn't just have to be one, it could be some combination of these things. And this is in that handout, so be sure and grab that, because this can be a really helpful way to look at the demand side of this and make sure that you're set. In terms of expanding capacity, maybe you've got a certain number of spaces in a garage that you can handle cars, or you've got a certain array of products, but maybe people are looking for some more things coming back out of all this. Here's some questions you can think about to expand capacity. So If it's more, we're just going to be offering what we've always offered, can you shift people around? Can you get every possible resource to improve that capacity? Maybe you're changing your offering or experience a little bit. You're pivoting a little bit. So, are there some interim products that maybe are easier, or you can get supplies of those things? Maybe some of your parts suppliers haven't been available, but you can get something that maybe isn't exactly what you've always offered, but it will start to meet the need early on. Those could be possibilities as well. If you're on the service side of things, can you skip some steps, or maybe offer a pared down type of service? Finally, there's some other possibilities. I mean, is there some type of surge pricing that, if somebody pays more, you can invest more, or you could, ship in a particular part or something like that, or maybe you're setting up some dual operational processes, doing some things with time windows. So again, these questions are in the handout, but they're all ways to think about capacity. One thing that's really important, particularly if you're pulling in other resources, there's going to be a training component, not only for your people, but for your customers as well. I know I had a bank loan. I was trying to get some of those bank loans during this time, and somebody reached out to me from my bank and asked me for some information that was already in a spreadsheet that I'd provided. And I said to him, well, do you realize that's on the spreadsheet? He was like, you're kidding. I said, no, it's on your spreadsheet. He's like, I've called every single person I put into the system. So that was a case where they pulled in resources to improve their capacity, but they didn't train the people. So make sure if you're putting somebody in a new role, you've given them that background, and with your customers as well, if they're going to be experiencing something different, maybe that's an online video, maybe it's instructions at the door, maybe it's other ways that you're reaching out to them ahead of time to let them know this is going to look a little bit different. So if you're using these things, you should have a variety of options you can look at. How do you decide on what you're going to do? Well, there's a couple of ways. If you've got a lot of data, you've got a lot of information, use that and be very calculated about it. And I use this particular picture in a lot of presentations. This was Ted Williams of the Boston Red Sox. He had figured out the 77 different ball locations in his strike zone and what his batting average would be at each point. So if you've got the data to figure it out down to, well, here are our most valuable customers or their long-term value, or here's where we've got the greatest margin, fantastic, use that. Another way that I think a lot of us wind up doing at times where we maybe don't have all the data we'd want is just, put your options on Post-it notes and say, okay, I've got these two options, which one's better than the other, and put that one on top, and then look at another one and say, well, where does it fit? That can be a pretty simple and effective way to cut through a lot of options. But I think the point here is you don't necessarily need to lock in on here's just one way of doing things. You may treat some of your loyal customers a little bit different than maybe your regular customers versus the people that you're trying to drive in or attract to your business. But importantly, you want to do it based on what's going to be important and how are you going to achieve the best results for your business. One thing that goes along with this at times, particularly people who are in the service industry who are really expert, focus on trying to make everything perfect, you may need to change some standards around to increase capacity. So we talk about FOTRP as focus on the right perfect. What really needs to be perfect as you open back up, as you expand capacity? And maybe it's the performance. So the quality of service that you've done has always got to be the same, but you're going to make changes in that interaction pattern, so there's less personal interaction. That's okay, but spell that out up front for your team and spell it out for your customers. And I can't emphasize this enough, and this harkens back to the first webinar we did on messaging, is your messaging to your customers is as important as those operational choices you're making about how you're going to handle capacity. You want to present these things to them in light of the benefits. So even if it's your strategy is based on here's what's good for us, you want to be able to lay it out to them of, well, here's why we still have reduced hours, because we're able to clean the shop or clean the retail space to make sure it's safe for you. Or we're setting up a reservation system now so that you don't have to wait, that you can come in, drop off a car and leave right away to minimize the interaction with other people. Again, even if it's the right thing for you, you've got to figure out what's the way that that's a benefit for the customer, and you want to lead with that in all of your messaging. So pretty quick move through here, But you want to start with identifying what the new important looks like for you. Make good decisions, not on what's always worked, but what's going to be most important going forward. Start with exploring, demand, capacity. Some places capacity may be the limiter and you want to start there. Others, it's on the demand side. Doesn't really matter, but you want to address both sides of it. Look at options that maybe are combinations of things. You don't have to just pick one. You can combo these things up that we talked about and maybe find the right or the better option to make sure your customer experience is as great as possible. And then finally, as you start to roll this out and talk to customers, let them know what's going on. Make sure you talk about the benefits. How is this going to help them? Because ultimately, they're going to create the success that you're looking for in your processes. So with that, we'll open up to some questions. And Zane, maybe you've got those poll results we can take a look at as well and sort of get a sense of where everybody's at on the call today.
Yeah, so thanks, Mike. Well done again. Let's see if we can bring up the poll results. We had a little technical difficulty trying to load the question, so let's see what we got here. All right. So looking at that, what's the current status of your business operations? The big chunk there are we are operating more or less at a regular capacity, so that's optimistic. That's good news. 38% says we are operating at a reduced capacity. So you kind of got both ends of the spectrum there, right. Which, from all the information that SEMA has done and reaching out to our membership, that seems to be in alignment. All right, so let's bring Mike back up. Perfect. All right, there you are. Listen, we're getting good at this thing.
Yeah, zinging around right, screen to screen, and possibilities are
the good news is there's a lot. There's people more competent than either one of us on the back end of this thing, making us look good.
Absolutely.
All right. Hey, so if you haven't submitted a question already, go ahead and on your control panel, use that questions prompt and text us in a message, and we'll do our best to get to it. But we do have a few, and we'll get started there. The first one is from Matt, and it kind of gets to the heart of surge pricing, and his question is this, Mike. Regarding your thoughts on increasing supply, how would you recommend a business deal with the potential negative feedback of surge pricing? So whether they're actually doing it or not, there's this optics out there that companies are exploiting the situation.
I think a level of transparency is going to be really good, is to help people understand you're not doing this to take advantage of them or try and blow your margins out while it's convenient for you, but to talk about hey, we're shipping in if it's a part situation, we're shipping in parts and there's increased costs with that. We're paying our people overtime so that they're more available. This really let them know here's the underlying reasons for that. And here's how we're trying to minimize that, how we're trying to absorb maybe some of those extra costs, but we need to share that because that puts us in the best position to serve you now and to serve you later on as well. That's a great question.
I'd say, every interaction you have with a customer at this point is either going to be a positive interaction or a negative interaction. And ultimately, that's going to have a long-term effect on your brand loyalty. Rather than trying to make everything up in one shot, do things the right way, take care of your customers, and your business will come out stronger on the other end for sure. All right.
Actually, to pick up on that, that may be where if you don't have some kind of a loyalty program, maybe you put that in. That if somebody's got a service commitment over the next 18 months or something, and you drop that price down, and like Zane said, you're getting it back over time, but it's not in that first transaction. But you've got maybe a little bit stronger relationship then to work with.
Yeah, this question's it's interesting. I'm curious to see how you're going to navigate an answer here, Mike. And this comes from Max in Chino. And we know like cities and municipalities are opening at various rates depending on their local government or city council.
Right.
So if you have a competitor in an adjacent city that is afforded the opportunity to open up a little bit earlier than you are, how do you kind of deal with customers that may be antsy for your product or service, and now they see a competitor is open and available?
Yeah, And that's an interesting question because I'm sort of living in the heart of it. So I mentioned that the person that cuts my hair had contacted me last week. She contacted me yesterday to reset the appointment. Now I live in Kansas. Missouri barbershops are open now, so I can drive 3 miles and go find a new barber. But the fact that she reached out proactively, she set an appointment, she was maintaining that customer relationship. So I think that's a thing you can look at. You don't necessarily have to sit back and just say, well, they're going to go to this next town. Reach out to your customers, talk to them about it. It may be a time to heavy up on some social media advertising or more traditional advertising or marketing communications to let people know, here's where we're opening up. Here's why we're better than some of the other options, and take it proactively. The third thing may be, it may be a time to strike up a partnership with a competitor. And I know that can sound odd, but maybe they're going to be at peak demand and they need to offload some things. Well, maybe, if you're not open from a retail standpoint, you can at least be from behind the scenes or do some service things with a very small contingent. Or maybe you even set up for your customers to have a preferred slot over at a competitor. Again, you got to really trust somebody not to poach that business, but there's a whole variety of things at least you can think through and say, from those, what are the best options? You don't need to just sit back and go, wow, we're 2 weeks behind and we're never going to catch up.
Yeah, you hit a good point there. Whether you enter a partnership with a competitor or another entity, it's just taking a step back to look at things differently. Like you emphasize all the time, Mike, it's about being innovative. So it's kind of, how do you color outside the lines, or at least look at those opportunities to see what makes sense for your business?
Yeah.
This next question is from Kyle, and this is a really interesting question. And I will preface it this way: the automotive aftermarket is based on want, not need, right? We sell emotion in a relationship with parts.
Right.
So unlike a haircut or a pure service item that is a need, if you don't want your hair to look like this, you're gonna figure out a way to get it cut. But predicated by that, how do you think people will respond to parts after this that aren't need-based? Has the economy or the psyche switched enough where people are going to be a little bit more reserved and getting back to their lifestyle prior to the COVID-19?
Boy, yeah, and I try and stay away from predictions because I don't know. But I mean, I think as you think through that, I think there's certainly going to be a period where some people have had jobs the entire time, and hey, I just had to work from home and it was frustrating, but economically I'm pretty whole. But when you look at the unemployment rate, when you look at job furloughing or reduced hours, there's a whole group of people that have just been hit like crazy. And I don't think you can imagine anything but the fact that they're going to be watching every dollar. And my car's working, or it'd be really cool to get this part I looked at, but I'm going to sit back on the sidelines. I think that's where you've got to look at your customer base and maybe your location, and can you go online more and sell into other markets where maybe you can reach people who you've got more people who are in a better economic position than where you are nearby. It may be that's where you have to look at pivoting your business. I know for us, we did a pivot where we are in the process of introducing a service that's at a lot lower price point than we've ever done before. And a lot of what we do is want. I mean, a lot of companies can look at strategy and go, oh, we're fine. We'll just go ahead without. So we're trying to open the door to people and make that a little bit easier. So if you're from the service side, maybe you have a reduced service. If it's from a part, as Zane said, I think go back and play on the emotion of that. And maybe some of your marketing needs to speak to less about a specific part than, you missed your car, you missed being able to do these things. And I think anybody who's a car person who's sort of had to sit at home, there's pent up demand for the experience, even if there's not pent up demand for the parts. So maybe you market more to the experience that they've been missing and say, hey, let's get back and live in that life.
Yeah, you emphasize something really important there at the end that I think aligns well with our industry, and that's the experience of it. So I think there's this balance between being sensitive to the challenges that companies and individuals are going through, but also understanding that on the other end, people are wanting to get back to life as they knew it, and the things that they are passionate about. And we certainly know that the automotive industry is very much passion driven. So how do you kind of market to that end in terms of getting people to re-engage in some of the activities that may have been lost during this time?
Absolutely.
We're a couple minutes over, but I do want to get to one more question, and then we will announce the winner of the e-course. All right. The last question here comes from Stephen in Anaheim Hills. And this is it, Mike. It says, hey, we're okay having enough people to work, but our space is limited. We can only work on so many cars at a time. It doesn't seem like we have a lot of great options. So marrying the capacity to meet the demand.
Right. A couple of things there. I mean, going back to that earlier question, that may be where you reach out, maybe a competitor is more compromised financially or they're teetering. It can be weird to seem like you're offering a helping hand, but if they've got a couple of bays and, it allows you to go from working on 4 cars to 7 cars, maybe you're striking up a partnership with them and taking advantage of the capacity that they have. It may be, are there other places or other venues that you can be working on cars? Look at physical space around. I mean, can you put up some tents? Can you put up some other temporary structures that would allow you to expand that capacity? So, I think Zane said before about color outside the lines. I think outside your 4 walls as well. How can you use other space? And if there are other businesses going out, even if they're not necessarily a car place, if you feel like, hey, there's some demand here that's going to be consistent over a couple of months, can you do some just basic retrofitting to say, you know what, there's a nearby place and we'll just shuttle cars back and forth between them. So you need to think creatively and just think beyond what things look like right now and say, what else could this be to fit a need that we've got?
Yeah, I think that's kind of a great closing note. It's rather than saying what we can't do, you have to start looking at what we can do. If you missed any of the previous webinars, we will make them available on the SEMA Education Facebook page. Make sure you follow us, hashtag SEMA Education, or you can email us directly and we will get that content in your inbox for you to review and enjoy. All right, be safe, everybody. Have a great day, evening, and week. Talk soon.